bud.
There's an incredible freedom that comes with using a cellular phone.
I got all my guys working on it right now.
And once you've experienced it, there's no turning back. Now, through this special TV offer, you can receive a Motorola flip phone with Cellular One service for just pennies a day. Now, everyone can enjoy the freedom of a personal cellular phone. You can make a call anywhere or get a call anytime. Stuck in traffic? Call and change that meeting before you're late.
Yeah, John, let's change the meeting to 10.
Change of plans?
Call me if you need
No problem with the flip phone. Can't remember those directions? Just give a call.
Okay, right on Oak Street.
It's that easy. Got car trouble?
I can't get my car to start. Can you come and help?
Help is just a call away. Order today and take advantage of Cellular One's great service for just pennies a day. We'll even give you free evening calling and free weekend calling for 6 full months. So don't waste a beautiful day waiting for that call. Put it in your pocket or purse and make the most of your time. This offer is so convenient, you won't have to leave the comfort of your own home. Get your Motorola flip phone for the amazing price of just $19.95, delivered direct to your door within a few days, ready to use. You'll also receive the desktop charger and this beautiful leather case, a $25 value, absolutely free. And remember, by ordering today, you get free evening calling and free weekend calling for 6 full months. It's an incredible offer. Now everyone can enjoy the freedom of a personal cellular phone for just pennies a day. So what are you waiting for? The Motorola flip phone with Cellular One service. Don't miss out. Call now.
There has never been a better time to go cellular.
Hello, students. I'm recording this little lecture about mobile phones from my campus office. I usually make these video lectures from home, but I got a little bit of time this afternoon, and I want to get this done. So hopefully you'll learn something from this. The first thing I want to show is this image. This is a cartoon character, Dick Tracy, appeared in a daily comic strip, I think in the 1930s. He had a two-way wrist radio where he could receive messages and also talk to people through the radio. And when mobile phones were new, coming out in the 1970s and the 1980s, a common refrain in press coverage was to refer to Dick Tracy. When people don't understand something new, they usually look to the past to try and find some model from the past. So in press coverage of early mobile phones, there was a very common refrain, "Oh, it's like the thing Dick Tracy used to have." I've got a couple of slides about the history of this electronic device. But before I get into that, I just want to talk about some other points. First off is this belief, this notion that newer is always better, that the new is always better. And associated with this is this notion that mobile phones have made the world more productive. You could reach anywhere, anybody, anywhere, anytime. Therefore, that makes you more productive. However, there's an alternate point of view that when you have a finite period of time to do work, say you were in the office 8 to 5, 8 to 4, 9 to 5, something like that, in sort of a stereotypical work day, you get all your work done and then you go home and you relax and you recharge and you come back the next day. When people, colleagues, clients, your boss is calling you, texting you at all hours of the day and night, that produces sort of an unpleasant, almost irritated mental state. So perhaps the expansion of productivity is not really an expansion, we're just destroying our leisure time. Okay, that is one notion, that we are just destroying our leisure time. I'm also very interested in the evolution of mobile phone etiquette. I've been paying attention to mobile phones for a number of years, and every year it seems like I see new and new signs. Stay off your phone while you're at the cash register, or please get off your phone here, or those little things that appear before the movie, right? When we used to go see movies in the actual theater, there would be a little, sometimes it was a promotion for another movie, but also telling you to get off your phone. There are certain areas which we in the United States have designated as not acceptable to be on your mobile phone. People inside trains, inside planes, inside any type of public transportation, that tends to be seen as rude. In certain places where they have light rail, people taking trains into New York City, they will actually designate, no phone cars because people want silence. They don't want to have to listen to someone else's conversation. I think the more expensive a restaurant is, think about it, the more expensive a restaurant is, the less likely you are to use your mobile phone. In McDonald's or a fast food restaurant, anything goes. But expensive restaurants, I would say if it has a white tablecloth, you shouldn't be on your phone. Places of religious worship, that's another big no-no. But then when it comes to being actually inside of a movie theater, I mentioned that once already, in other parts of the world, apparently that's not considered rude. And I have seen people in other parts of the world using their phones in a movie theater, which I consider to be very, very rude. Oh, live theater. Yeah, if you went to see a Broadway show or something like that, I think you would not be on your phone. So anyway, I just think it's interesting as these devices become more and more thoroughly integrated into modern life, we are finding places where we want them removed. I want to talk just for a moment about horror movies. To me, this is a very succinct example of the way mobile phones are thoroughly integrated into every aspect of modern society. People say that, cell phones are a very, very bad thing for horror movies because, if a person, say a stereotypical woman, is going to walk into a scary house, she can just get on her phone and call 911, right? Isn't that what you're always screaming at the TV or the movie screen, call for backup, call for backup. So there's this recurring motif about the use of phones in horror movies. What's very common also now in horror movies is that someone will make a remark about the phone doesn't work, my battery's dead, or we're buying a new house. This house happens to be out of cell phone coverage range. There's a montage that I've posted on Canvas that illustrates this, that if you want to tell an effective horror movie now, a very, very standard thing to do is to explain why the heroes don't just call for backup. Okay, a couple of slides about history now. Before we had mobile phones, there was a different form of mobile communication. It was actually a one-way form of communication, the transistor radio. Prior to the 1960s, certainly in the 1930s and 40s, radios were rather large devices. They were cumbersome. They had batteries. Putting a radio in your automobile was difficult because of this. And if you had a radio in your house, it was typically a big appliance, almost like a piece of furniture. Various inventors figured out how to make a functioning radio that was much, much smaller. It could fit in your shirt pocket, the transistor radio. And there was an explosion of these devices in the 1960s. And if you look at some of the way people talked about transistor radios, and I have looked at some of the press coverage of transistor radios, the themes are remarkably similar to the way people would later talk about mobile phones. Here's a headline about the transistor radio: the ability to bring music and religion and even revolution to different parts of the world. So I think it's interesting to me the way the same utopian hopes and dystopian fears that we have about new forms of technology are even expressed with the transistor radio. After World War II, many media innovations often come about during times of war, specifically with radio and also television. During World War II, the number of available radio frequencies expanded greatly as people figured out new ways to send wireless information, wireless signals. Motorola, which made radios for cars, wanted to capitalize on this new market. So Motorola recommends to the FCC that they create something called the Citizens Band. This will be a band of radio frequencies used by the average citizen, not big, powerful radio stations. Now, Citizens Band radio did not develop very, very quickly at all. It did not develop very, very quickly at all. However, there was an explosion of the technology in the early and mid 1970s. It became extremely popular amongst truck drivers. Many of them, you were supposed to have a license to use a CB radio. Many of them did not. And a way to avoid that was to use an alias or a pseudonym, a Big Alligator. My grandfather called himself TikTok, Big Daddy, something like that. You come up with a colorful, clever name for yourself. So the truck drivers would trade information to one another, saying, here's where the police are, here's a speed trap, maybe telling another truck driver about an accident, or maybe where there is inexpensive gasoline. Okay, so the truck drivers began to use this, and there was a lot of protests against rising gasoline costs and also the imposition of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. Truck drivers said, we can't make a living like this. So they organized protests using CB radio. So CB radio became associated with a rebellious technology. It is a way to circumvent the authority, okay? And it was particularly associated with male truck drivers. But then there was just a huge pop culture explosion. All sorts of people began putting CB radios in their car. I think they were trying to sort of emulate the stereotypical masculine truck driver. Breaker 19. There were different CB channels. 19 was the main truck driver channel. Breaker 19 means, can I speak on channel 19? Breaker 19 became a standard CB greeting. People often referred to themselves as good buddy. They had a whole list of slang terms for women, I think a diner, like a greasy spoon diner, was called a choke and puke. You know, I stopped at the choke and puke. Very gross phrase there. And the movie that really capitalized on this pop culture craze was Smokey and the Bandit, starring Burt Reynolds. If you've never seen that movie, it's actually a pretty clever movie, but there's just so much CB radio lingo in there, all this jargon, that sometimes it feels like, well, maybe we need a little vocabulary guide. Now, there are some similarities between the growth of CB radio and the explosion of social media, in that when the platform was limited mainly to truck drivers, it had a certain status. As it expanded and sort of the average suburban parent puts a CB radio in their station wagon, it kind of loses its status, right? It kind of loses its status. And also the fact that people adopted identities and came up with clever or not so clever fake names for themselves, I think was another parallel with social media. Here is a quote from a 1977 guide to CB radio. This touches on the recurring theme that every form of new media technology is going to solve all the problems of the world. CB is the door to a new world of communication that has no experts, no authorities. On CB, there is no big brother, there is only good buddy. Good buddy being the sort of standard phrase you refer to someone on CB radio. CB radio kind of growth stalled because I think it got overcrowded and it was of less value and use when there was just so much inane chatter, as it were. CB radio is still used by truck drivers. It is still used by truck drivers, but I think the average suburban family has moved on and no longer plays with CB radio. Another thing about CB radio and all forms of mobile media, is that it opens you up to surveillance. Okay, the panopticon is a name for a type of prison where the prison guards are in the middle, surrounded by glass. There's a circular room around it with different rows of cells. The idea being that the guards can see into every single cell, and the prisoners become habituated in that way. Even when there is no guard, in the middle of the prison, you think there might be a guard, so you act in a certain way. I think CB radio and mobile phones and social media are like one big giant panopticon. Yes, you can communicate with anyone you want. Yes, you can plan subversive activities like blocking a freeway like the truck drivers did. However, the authorities can also theoretically monitor everything that you're doing. Now getting up to cell phones in particular. Motorola was a company that first developed the cell phone. AT&T, the phone company, was also trying to come up with their own version. Once these two companies had functioning models, the FCC refused to give them proper spectrum. We've talked about spectrum before in relation to radio and TV. The FCC wanted television to remain the dominant media technology, and they did not believe that there was a big audience. They did not believe there was a big audience for a commercial cell phone service, thinking who really needs this? Why do people need a phone in their pocket? There was also a fiasco with the AT&T picture phone. AT&T had a way of sending video and audio. This was not a mobile device. This was a landline device, but it did send video and audio, and it just didn't work. Customers didn't want it. However, it is featured in the classic film 2001. There is an AT&T branded picture phone, and when the film was made, they probably thought it was going to be a big technology, and it now is just sort of a kind of a historical artifact. I just want to explain quickly, cell phone technology refers to a particular way of dividing up the radio frequencies. Each cell is somewhat of a small geographic range. So when you're broadcasting, you're not broadcasting all the way across the country. You're broadcasting within a particular cell, and then the cell phone tower determines which cell to send it to, and then sends your message maybe across the country, now maybe across the planet, to its own cell. So when we're talking about cell phones, we're talking about this particular way of dividing up radio frequencies. The first cell phone call, I would say first, is maybe questionable, as most firsts are. But this individual was an engineer at Motorola. Martin Cooper was his name. And he put together a bunch of engineers and figured out a way to do this and a way to bring it to the market. Okay. Now, the first is kind of a matter of some dispute. I'm sure they did this in the laboratory. There was also a call done on a train that demonstrated the handoff technology that I talked about, transferring a signal from one cell to another cell. But on April 3rd, 1973, he made the first public demonstration. He walked out on a street in New York City with this handheld device, and his engineers must have put up some transmitters, right? Because if there weren't cell phone transmitters, this thing would have never worked, but they must have put up some cell phone transmitters. He, as the legend goes, stands across the street and calls an executive, his rival at AT&T, stands in the street, calls him, says, "Hey, come to the window, wave to me." And the guy looks down and curses and says, "Oh my God, Martin Cooper has done it." Anyway, that's the story. I think it's largely true, maybe embellished a little bit, but I think it's largely true. And he lives in Del Mar. It's a photo of me and Martin Cooper. Yeah, that's a photo of me and Martin Cooper. I had to track him down. Now, I've just got a couple of slides left, but what this slide shows, this is from India, but the trend applies everywhere, okay? The red line indicates the revenue that mobile phone companies are making from voice calls. This is from 2016 up until a period of 2018. The voice usage is going down. The amount of traffic devoted to voice is going down, but the amount of revenue associated with data usage is going up, okay? This is sometimes referred to as average revenue per user, ARPU. So the ARPU voice revenue is going down. The ARPU data revenue is increasing, and this trend is global, and this trend is not stopping. And I think this is an example of user innovation. This is an example of user innovation with things like texting. The companies that invented mobile phones did not foresee the technology being used in this way. In fact, they didn't even foresee a market for mobile phones at all, okay? So this is why we're seeing more and more things, other things to do on your phone other than actually make phone calls, games you can play, you can use it as a wallet, you can call a taxi, everything you could think of, listening to music, watching TV, because the mobile phone companies need people to use more and more data so they can keep making more money. The first type of media content created specifically for the mobile phone was a ringtone, okay? In '93, Japanese company, Japan has led in many areas when it comes to mobile technology, developed a way to put a song very simple song. And then in 98, in Finland, Nokia figured out a way to do it. And these were just, very, very simple songs, but customers liked that they could customize their ringtone. And then by 2004, it was a $5 billion industry. Billboard, which charts music and tracks music, Billboard had its own ringtone chart. Into Club by 50 Cent. That's how you say it, right? You don't say 50 cents, you say 50 Cent. That was a big, big ringtone hit. And then the last big ringtone that charted was something by Taylor Swift. And by 2014, the ringtone charts were gone largely because of Apple's iPhone. You could play an entire song on your phone. You did not need to play some simplified, modified version of the song. You could actually play the whole song. The image on the left was a series of albums called Crazy Frog. It actually comes from a ringtone. Someone, like some teenager, made a ringtone where he was imitating the sound of a motorcycle or a motor scooter. And then DJs started to take this ringtone, remix it, put 80s dance beats behind it. And this was a phenomenon called Crazy Frog, which I remember when I heard about that, like a remixed ringtone is on the top of the charts in the UK. That sounds like the craziest thing I ever heard. But yeah, ringtones were a big deal for a while. And finally, we have the top apps for 2020. This is from Forbes magazine. They're citing some organization called Apptopia. So I'm going to assume that these are correct. But in 2020, yeah, TikTok grew really big. And this is global. WhatsApp, as we've talked before, WhatsApp is big in other parts of the world, not necessarily so much in the United States. But again, we're going to see more and more apps and more devices, or more and more ways to use this mobile device in the future.